Hey, this is Nikki from Nana's Quilt Cottage. Well, this little video is based on the Cheer and Merriment quilt that we are making as our block of the month here at Nana's in the fall of 2022. And so the gals have asked me if I'll just do a little tutorial on how to put the blocks together. No sizes or any measurements will be shared in this. If you'd like to purchase a pattern, please call us here at Nana's and we can sell you the pattern. We do have kits for this quilt as well. You may have seen my video previously about how to use the Ultimate Flying Geese ruler, which is how I made the different flying geese units that we're using in this block. But what I'm going to go over in this video is just how to put the block together. Basic construction information, all right? So what block I'm working on in here in the booklet, on page 2 of the booklet, we are doing block D. We're doing them out of order because I'm doing them based on skill level, so we're just building up to harder blocks. That's kind of what you do in a block of the month. So the block that we're making is block D, and what I'm going to go over is some just simple parts of it. So in my previous video, I showed you how to make the little flying geese units, which are used in this block. All right, so we did those. So the next part of that is to lay out the block. I have the block laid out here in front of me. You can see it here in the video. Let me scoot my pieces down just a smidge. It was either be headless or have part of my board missing. I decided I didn't want to be headless. So here's how my pieces. So what I've done with my flying geese units is I've taken each flying geese unit and I've sewn it to a rectangle, a background rectangle. All right? When I sewed it to the background rectangle, I'm going to sew from the side with the goose. It shows better on this piece. I'm going to sew from the side with the goose. And the reason why, the back of it, is when I sew down this piece, I want to make sure that I sew to the upper side of that where the point meets on the goose, because when I press it, I don't want to lose my points. That's a big thing for a lot of us. We don't want to lose our points. So when I sew through this, I want to make sure I sew from this side, because if I sew on this side, I'm not going to be able to tell where that point is. But if I sew on this side, I can see my point. So I'm just going to sew through and sew a little bit to the side toward the seam allowance of that point so that when I press it, it comes out perfect, okay? So I have all those sewn together here. Then what we're going to do, I've sewn the creams to those. I'm going to lay out my pieces. So I have my variety of colored blocks. I have my background large rectangles. So then I'm going to put my block together like a 9 patch. So I'm going to do it in rows. So I'm going to go through and I will sew, flip this one over. I'll sew this seam here. I'll sew this to this, this to this. Press them. I'm pressing them towards the plain block that has nothing going on it. I always say I'm pressing toward the one of least resistance. Okay, then I'm going to go back and do the same thing again. So take this one, sew this one on, sew this one on, sew this one on. Press them again toward the one of least resistance, and then I'll piece the rows together. What that does is it gives me this block right here. Okay, so I've sewn those together. You can see when I got done, I pressed everything away from the center. Okay. So all my seams match together. So I'm going to take out these center pieces and replace them with the piece I've sewn. It's a nice thing of TV magic. Okay, so here's my now sewn block for the center. So let's talk how we're going to put these together. Okay, so I've made my little 9 patch in the center, and you can see that those little flying geese units make this a square and a square look to this block. So now I'm going to take my rectangle of cream and add it on. Now what I like to do is I'm going to sew on the side that has the seams. And the reason why I like to do that is because then I can make sure these seams do not flip over while I'm sewing. Keeps my back much smoother. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pin this on. I'm a pinner. I like to put a lot of pins in my stuff because I don't want it to move. I don't want my seams to look straight and nice and everything to come out very cohesive in the end. So you'll see that I probably put more pins in there than you may put in there, and that's fine. It's my project. I'm the one's got to pull them all out, not you, right? So I'm going to pin these on. And I like to even pin my seams down. Then they don't fuss with me either. So I'm sewing with them on top so I can see them, and I pin them down. Okay, so there's my block all pinned. I have my machine set at a scant 1/4 inch. And I'm going to go ahead and sew this on. And so see, because I have it on top here, I can watch it to make sure it stays nice and flat as I go through. All right, so I've sewn that one. I'm gonna cut my thread. I'm gonna sew the same rectangle on the other side, same process. My thread cutter needs to be cleaned. Okay, so I have that first rectangle on there. So now I'm gonna sew one on the opposite side, the rectangle. Just lining up my edges. All right, get this all pinned on. Next, after this, I'm going to show you these really great pins that I want to show you and feature today, which is the forked pins. If you've never used forked pins, you're in for a treat. They're a lot of fun to use. I was never really much into them. I knew about them, but I hadn't used them very much. And then when Beth started working here, she is a huge fan of forked pins. And so she shows them to everybody. And she's got me using them now too. So they're a lot of fun, and they're very useful to keep your seams nice and matched up. So I really like them for that. Okay, so I'm just gonna sew this little piece right here. I'm gonna pass this over to Miss Laura in a second, and she's gonna maybe press it for me so I don't have to go completely off camera. We're just gonna, and what we're gonna do, oh, I hit my cut button a little too early. Okay, now I gotta resew that because I hit my cut just a little too early. So when we press this here, we're going to press it out toward the rectangles on this, the background rectangles, because like I said, I'm pressing toward the one of least resistance. All right, so I pass this off camera. She's going to press that for me. And then what we're going to be using, I was telling you about these forked pins. These are amazing. So little forked pins, they're very thin. We like the Clover brand, that's what we sell the most of here, is the Clover ones because they're very thin and you can sew over them easy. There's another version called Magic Pens, but they're thicker and I don't like sewing over them as much, so we prefer the Clover brand. They come in this nice little carrying case. I think there's 35 in here, I believe. 35 or 50 in this little package here. But that's what we're gonna use to pin this next one. And you'll see how it's gonna make our seams nest really nicely. Okay, so there we are. There's our block. We've pressed it out. So you can see she pressed it toward the background. So now we're going to put the last one on, and this is where we're going to nest the seams. So we're going to lay this one on top, pretty to pretty. And then, oops, I pressed this one the wrong way. That's okay. So when you do these little blocks, you want to press these in toward the cream. Okay? So press these toward the cream. I pressed them the wrong way. Thank you. I have little elves to help. So you press it this way, and then your seams are going to nest really nice on there. Okay, so I'm going to just lay this on top here, and my seams will nest because they're going opposite directions. Then I'm going to take and put the forked pin in. I'm going to hold it up so you can see it in a second, but how this works. But it basically snugs on both sides of the seam. And it's beautiful how it goes in there and it holds it so nicely. But then that way my fabric stays right in place. I'm going to hold it up for you in just a moment. Like I said, I'm a crazy pinner. I put lots of pins in my stuff. Okay, so you can see how those forked pins are in there. They're on both sides of the seam. Okay, come even closer so you can really see it. Okay, so you see how that forked pin is on both sides of that seam? Okay, so that works. And then also what I do when I pin these, I'm pinning down these on the back side because I'm going to sew from this side. So that kind of helps hold them in place. All right, so go ahead, I'm going to sew this. Again, this is from the Cheer and Merriment quilt by Fancy Dot Designs. And this is our block of the month currently here at Nana's, and we have kits and the pattern available at this time. If you wait too long, you might not be able to find it. All right, and the kits match the colors we're using in these blocks here. One of the few quilts we've done at Nana's where the fabrics are exactly all from the same designer, we didn't mix any extra ones in, which I'm really famous for doing. Okay, now because we did that with those pins, these seams are perfect. They match up just beautifully. Everything's matched up, nice and straight, just like we want it. So now I'm gonna take the other piece and I'm gonna put it on. Same thing again, I'm gonna use my forked pins and they just slide in like butter. And they sandwich on both sides of that seam, so they're holding it down. Put them in on both sides. All right, then I'll put a couple more pins in between. Okay. All right, now I'm going to sew this one, and I'll hold it with the block so you can see it. And after I get done sewing this block, I'm going to use flatter to press it. So if anything isn't wanting to lay down just like I want it to, it will after I put a little flatter on it. It's a great product when you're piecing blocks. And you can sew right over these, so that way your seam stays perfect the whole time and doesn't move on you. That's what's nice about those forked pens that are so thin from Clover. All right, so we'll press this in a moment, but here is our block. All our seams match up beautifully because of the use of the fork pins. I use the fork pins when I pieced here as well. I use those. I just sewed those before I videotaped. So there's our block. This is block D from the Cheer and Merriment quilt. I hope you enjoyed this little tip video. Have a great day, and remember, get creative at Nana's.